I think there could not have been a better start than what we saw just a half an hour back, Dr. Sahadevan sir, and such a confidence building session that is using very small and very light medicines, which it has got, I think that is what actually we call as prabhava of these, of Ayurveda. And I think the house surgeons could not have got a much better session than from Dr. Sahadevan. And what I would like to do is just sprinkle a few thoughts for you to just ponder upon, to add to what Chandni teacher said right now, that we need more discussions. So I'm just trying to make a recap of things that you've learned before. Just sprinkle a few thoughts in your mind. How are these medicines acting? Why is Drakshadi Kashayam effective in the conditions like salpingitis and endometriosis? Why is this Maharasnadi Kashayam? Why can we give it in tubal blocks, Saptasaram? All these simple things. Just a few thoughts. I'm not going into any thought of therapeutics. Just a few thoughts for you to ponder upon. So that's why I have titled my talk as Physiological Review of the Factors for Fertility. The family is the unit of life, and every species is trying to increase its numbers for the continuity of generations. It's just an instinctual process. The process of reproduction is just an instinctual process. So it's always represented as a tree. You always call it as a family tree. So anyway, what I have shown here is the royal family tree of Britain, starting from Queen Elizabeth. But whatever, ningadekka veettilundo nu ariyilla, ende achchante veettil oru taravadi yogundi. We always put a tree and show the first ammuma and sheshala ammuma. All ammumas are shown on a tree. So all the concept of family is based on a tree. So that is why our acharyas have compared the infertility or the lack of progeny to a branchless, flowerless, fruitless tree. So our aim is to make it the flowering like our kanikonna. Adu kandalulla bhangi onnu vera thanneyana. Appo aa kuttigal kalichu nadakkunna oru kalimuttam ennu parayunnathu aanu oru manusha jeevithathile saabhalyam ennu parayunnathu adana. So that is why this in the beginning of the Vajikarna Adhyaya itself, Acharya, both in Ashtangridaya and Charaka, they say that Achaya Puri Kusuma Phalena Rahido Drumaha Yadhekascha Ega Shakhascha. There is no company. So, factors involved in fertility. Just sir has told about the spermatogenesis. These are the different. If you look at these factors, there is a tubal factor, there is a uterine factor, there is a sperm factor, there is the embryo factor. There are different factors involved. If you look in many of the gynecology texts, you will not find a description about the factors for fertility. I looked in about 5 or 6 texts. I found in one text that describes the factors involved in fertility. And if you look at these, about more than 60%, that the lion's share of the factors is dependent on women. That is 60% of the fertility factors are dependent on women. That means infertility has become socially also a problem of the woman. That is, even if the man has got a problem, it's the woman who has to bear the brunt of infertility. It has become a social issue. And whatever I've seen, I think you can see 2 pictures here. Can you see 2 pictures here? One is that of a wine glass, that is in the white, and in the black, we can see 2 faces. So what we saw earlier, this is just factors in the foreground. But in the background, there are a number of other factors. That is where we miss out, because wherever we look, we just think of increasing sperm count, inducing ovulation. But there are a number of factors involved, like diet, sleep, physical activities, the stress factor involved. All these factors have to be considered, because the functions of the reproductive system is closely linked to so many other systems, and it is a culmination of all the physiological processes in the body. Oru dhatu sampurnadayana. Dhatu is for dharana, and shukra dhatu, that is for the maintenance of life, and shukra dhatu is for the maintenance of generations. So whenever we talk about the Dhatu Sampurnata, that is in between 16 to 40 years. Only when the Shukra Dhatu starts its functioning capacity, only then the Dhatu Sampurnata is reached. And that is when the person shifts or transfers his para ojas to the next generation. So ojas is being transmitted from one generation to another. And it is in this time of Dhatu Sampurnata that this transfer of ojas occurs. So it is during this time that Shukra Sarata, we talk of Vishuddhataro Dhatu in terms of Sara. So if you look at the Sarada descriptions, it is only in Majja Sara and Shukra Sara that they talk about Abatya Bhajaha. That is, Abatya is the formation of progeny, the formation of issues, the production of issues occurs only in the Majja Sara and the Shukra Sara conditions. That is, it is only when that Sara starts functioning that there is a chance for reproduction. So in Garbhavakrandi, it is said that Shuddhe Shukrartave Sattvasakarma Klesha Chodita. Here, this terms of Shukra is it has been used in lot of conditions. So if you look at the Shukra is actually a little more clearer, but Artava is a total confusion because there are a number of terms that used in the name of Artava, Raja, Asra, Pushpa, Lohida, number of terms are being used. So if you look at these terms, there is only confusion because if you don't understand the real nature of what Artava is actually indicating, what the term is actually indicating, what you get is total confusion. Because if you take up Shuddhe Shukrartave, if you take it as menstrual blood, then your whole concept is lost. So you have to understand what each word indicates in each situation. That is very important in the study of Ayurveda. This is not only in the context of Shukra Artava, in any other context also, you have to understand what the term actually means. That is what we actually call as Padartha. Each term has got a Shakti, and that Shakti has to be identified in each situation. So Artava, the term Artava is whatever is cyclical. Ritau Bhavam Artavam. Ritu or seasons occur in cycles. So whatever occurs in cycles is considered as Artava. So whatever is in a cyclical, there are Hindu has defined, or in Ashtanga Sangraha, Artava is defined as Raktameva Strinam Masi Masi Garbha Koshtam Anuprapya Triyaham Pravartamanam Artavam Ajakshade. From this definition, nobody has to explain to you what is Artava. That is Raktam Triyaham Pravartamana. What is menstrual blood is called as Artava. Now again we are confused. Is this the Artava that is being told in Shuddhe Shukrartave? But in the explanation, Hindu has himself told that it is not only the Artava that is seen outside, na kevalam bahya Artava. Whatever are the processes occurring simultaneously along with it, all these have to be called as Artava. So in this case, Ritu has been defined as Rituscha Nishiktasya Bijasya Phalaprasavanugunaha Kalaha. That is, which is the time period when a seed is sown, it is sure to bear fruit. That time is called as Ritu. The seed that is being sown here is the sperm and the ovum, and what is being produced is the Garbha. And that is why again Ritu is called as Rituscha Garbha Grahana Yogya Kalaha, which is the favorable period for conception or fertilization. And Ritu Ranganayaha Rajas Samayaha. It's all whatever are the cyclical processes occurring in the female body, all these have been indicated by using the term Ritu. So that is why it has been again, for our convenience, we have divided into Antar Ritu and Bahya Ritu. What is being seen outside is called as Bahya Ritu. That is the shedding of the endometrium, the visible menstrual cycle, the visible Ritu. And the Antar Ritu is the invisible Ritu. That is what is occurring inside the body, in the ovaries, as a cyclical process with the production of the ovum, the maturation of the follicles, etc. And same idea has been taken by Charaka when he defines Ritumati, Gate Purane Rajasi, Navecha Avasthide, Avyapanna Yoni Shonita Garbhasham, Shuddhasnadam Striyam, Ritumati Machakshmahe. So whatever are the processes occurring inside, Yoni Shonita Garbhashya, whatever is the process occurring inside and whatever are the processes which are visible outside, all these are combined to coin the term Ritu. So identification of Ritukala is a very important factor in fertility. It is the most important factor actually. Whatever be the other factors, if you're not able to make a proper contact during the Ritukala, you're not going to become fertile. So there is a dual nature of Shukra. That is, Shukra has been always, the functions of Shukra has been told as Harsha, Bala, Garbhotpadanehi, Shukram. When we study Ashtanga Hridaya, we only study Garbhotpadana, but the detailed description, little more detailed description is given in Sushruta Samhita, but at least when we go into Ashtanga Sangraha, there is a division into a part of Shukra that is doing the bija function and a part of Shukra that is doing a function all over the body. That is called as Sarva Shariragata Shukra. So Sarva Shariragata Shukra we have to consider at many levels. At the most simplest level we can consider at the level of the reproductive hormones. The hormones that are concerned with reproductive functions, we can start from the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the ovaries, even in the males it is the hypothalamus, pituitary and the testis. These all hormones are involved in building and rebuilding of other tissues, that is bones, blood, and even in our cognitive, in our thought process also these hormones are involved. So if you take a Sarva Sharira Gatatva, estrogen is needed for calcium deposition in bones. Testosterone causes the particular muscle growth and bone growth in males. It is responsible for the particular male form of thought, how they react to situations and all these. So it means that the field of action of Shukra Dhatu is the whole body. That is why it has been called as Sarva Shariragata Shukra. Apart from this, there are other hormones that influence the reproductive functions. The thyroid hormones, the adrenal hormones, the growth hormone, insulin. All these are hormones that influence the reproductive function. That means there are contributions from different parts of the body to the reproductive system. That also gives an indication of the Sarva Sharira Gadatva of the Shukra Dhatu. Again, when we think it's the same person, is Kottakkal Shivaraman. He is a person who does female leads in Kathakali. He acts as Draupadi, he acts as Damayanti. He is a male person but he acts in female roles. That is, the hormones are not male-female specific. They have got, the estrogen is produced in the male, it is needed for spermiogenesis. The testosterone is produced in the female, it is aromatized to estrogens. So it is actually Sarva, in all, Sarva Sharira Gada means it is not a male or a female. That is why I think there has been no particular description given in Sutrasthana about Artava. Only Shukra has been explained. If you look at the Shukra Vriddhi, Shukra Kshaya, only that has been explained. Only when we come to Sharirasthana, the concepts of Artava have been described there. So that means the Sarva Sharira Gadata means it is common for all individuals. So this is also pointing, I want to emphasize on this Sarva Sharira Gadatva. Now because I told you lion's share of the fertility problems lies with, or it is being charti koduthu to females. So because of that, I would like to just give a few examples about this concerning this female hormone estrogen. Estrogen is a very big player in the female reproductive because most of the female life, this estrogen is being produced. So the other hormones are produced only in very less quantities and only for very less duration. So estrogen, the main production site is of course from the ovaries in the follicles, but there are other sites from which estrogen is produced. That is, estrogen is acting as a local hormone as well as a systemic hormone. So in extragonadal sites, we can see the synthesis of estrogen in bones, even in the brain. So the estrogen in the bones is responsible for the bone effects of estrogen. That is, effects of estrogen and bone are caused by the estrogen that is synthesized in bone itself. The important thing is this, that even if the blood level of estrogen is less, the local level of estrogen may be more. And this is implicated in conditions like breast cancer. That is the, another important production of estrogen is from adipose tissue. So when adipose tissue produces this estrogen, it predisposes to breast cancer. So that is another important, sir. Estrogen synthesis in the brain. It is responsible when there is reduced estrogen. We hear of conditions like postpartum depression, the perimenopausal depression. It is due to the estrogen reduction. That is, during menopause, the ovaries and the extragonadal synthesis of estrogen reduces, and that is responsible for the perimenopausal syndromes. Here we can think of the combinations like Gandhatailam and Kalyanaka-Ghridam. Gandhatailam is made up of mainly and that is the main ingredient, and that is also estrogenic. Kalyanaka-Ghridam, it is told Aredasi, Alparedasi, Skaladvachi, it is told in Unmadam, but many of the Bhalashruti, it indicates towards its reproductive functions also. So these are points that we may have to research further. What is the role of Kalyanaka-Ghridam in increasing the estrogen synthesis from the brain? Is there a level of estrogen that is being increased because we are administering Kalyanaka-Ghridam? And I told you, adipose tissue is one of the major sites where there is aromatization of androgens. Aromatization is the conversion of an androgen to estrogen is called as aromatization. So adipose tissue is one of the major sites in which this aromatization occurs. And another function of this adipose tissue is to produce a hormone called as leptin. Leptin is a hormone that signals it is a signaling molecule between adipose tissue and the hypothalamus. So when there is enough adipose tissue in the body, the leptin increases the energy expenditure. There is a lot of adipose tissue, a lot of fats are present. These have to be, somehow they have to be expended. And it also inhibits the action of appetite generating hormones. There is enough energy in the body. Whenever we think of energy, we should think of Swedam. So can't we relate Medas and Swedam using the concept of leptin? Because it is leptin that increases the energy expenditure when there is an increase of adipose tissue. Again, during weight loss, leptin signals reduced, and there is craving, there is appetite centers are stimulated. One common application of this seen in after dieting. If you go on for a diet, so after some few days there is an immediate craving for food. That is because of this reduction of leptin levels. So when there is reduced leptin, it stimulates the appetite centers. So dieting will cause reduction in adipose tissue. It will reduce the amount of leptin and it will increase the craving for food. So leptin has got, this is just a few general actions of leptin. Leptin has got a very important role in puberty. It has got a permissive action on puberty. That is, it is leptin that signals the hypothalamo-pituitary-ovarian axis. That is, it has to become active. When does it become active? When the person reaches a particular body weight. When a particular body mass index is reached, leptin signals to the hypothalamus, see, the body has got enough energy to carry out the reproductive activities. So you may please start the HPO axis. So it is leptin that, it is not active, but it has got a permissive role. It permits the hypothalamo-pituitary-ovarian axis to start functioning. So it is this... So start of pubertal changes. A lot of metabolic changes are involved in puberty. A lot of muscle growth is there, bone growth is there, blood growth is there. So the body has to be ready for all this. So it is leptin that signals. And the reduced leptin in the case will also lead to anovulation and that is reduced androgen aromatization. When the person has not got enough body weight, it will lead to ovulation, reduced chances of less ovulation. Now now we are seeing that the pubertal age is coming down because this is what children do. They sit at home, sit in front of the TV, go munching. Their body weight reaches, even by about 8-9 years, they have got enough body weight to attain puberty. So early puberty means there is more calories, less physical activity, more adipose tissue, childhood obesity, more leptin, and there is early puberty. And that is one of the major reasons why pubertal age is now coming down because of this increase in the calories and adipose tissue. When you come to an adult, the role of leptin in male fertility. Sperm contains a receptor for leptin, and leptin is required for the sperm capacitation and motility. We all know sperm is kept in an inhibited state by a lot of cholesterol vesicles that surround the sperm. So whenever there is an increase of adipose tissue, there is an increase of leptin. So the increase of leptin is always associated with lot of sperm capacitation and sperm motility. And but as Sir has in almost all his talks, he has talked about hyperlipidemia and the triglyceride increase. So that is very important because obesity is a factor that reduces the sperm count, that reduces the sperm motility. We can all think of Kabhavanrattam. We don't have to think more when we go for sperm motility. and causes sexual dysfunction, and there is less testosterone and more estradiol, and that will completely havoc the spermatogenesis. And dyslipidemia leads to premature breaking of the acrosome, because whenever there is higher cholesterol, there is more leptin. Leptin increases the capacitation. The acrosome reaction is increased. So sperms are, even before they come out of the female genital tract, they are capacitated and they are broken down. Their heads become smaller. So all these changes occur whenever there is a condition of dyslipidemia. In females also, higher BMI and a sedentary lifestyle is related to ovulatory infertility. Whenever we think of adipose tissue, there are two kinds of adipose tissue. They say there is an apple distribution and a pear distribution. Apple distribution is seen in men, that is made of abdominal obesity. And the pear type of obesity is seen in females, that is gluteofemoral. That is, the obesity is more in the lower parts of the body, while in the males it is in the abdominal part of the body. This is not simply a difference of distribution, there is a difference in the cells that make up this abdominal fat and the gluteofemoral fat also. The visceral adipocytes, that is what is seen in the abdomen, kodavayara ennu parayunnathaanu abdominal obesity ennu parayunnathu. There the adipocytes are they are in a sort of an inflammatory state. They are in a pro-inflammatory state. So there are many abnormal chemicals that are produced from visceral adipocytes, and these abnormal, always an immune reaction. Sperm is something that is always outside the body. If sperm enters into circulation, it will trigger an immune reaction, and that is what produces anti-sperm antibodies and things like that. So whenever there is an obesity, whenever there is a visceral adiposity, the immune system is always active to combat something. So there is always reduced sperm counts, sperm motility, sperm morphology, increased anti-sperm antibodies, and increased sperm reactive oxygen species. We'll come to that. And DNA damage. So always visceral adiposity is not something that is very good for a male. It is an inflammatory condition. Reactive oxygen species. These are now being discussed for the past 10 or 15 years. We've been hearing of free radicals and the free radical theory of cellular damage and aging. So these free radicals or reactive oxygen species and the reactive nitrogen species, they are highly reactive molecules which are formed as a result of metabolism. They are trying to accept electrons or give away electrons, and they are always in a very active state. ശരിക്കും വാദം തന്നെയാണ്, എപ്പോഴും ഇങ്ങനെ ചാടി കളിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്, എങ്ങനെയെങ്കിലും ഒരു ഇലക്ട്രോണിനെ കിട്ടണം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കൊടുക്കണം. That is why they are related to cellular damage and aging. So main of the free radicals are superoxides, hydrogen peroxide and hydroxyls. They are the main, all of them are derived from oxygen. So that is why they are called as reactive oxygen species. Oxygen is very essential for life, but when it forms reactive oxygen, it is very damaging to life. These reactive oxygen species are actually very essential for in certain functions. So the sperm is highly susceptible to the reactive oxygen species. Once the sperm is going to, that is after the spermiogenesis, the sperm has lost most of its cytoplasm. Only a head is there, a tail is there, a small membrane is there, only that much is there. So it does not have much mechanisms to prevent this reactive oxygen species injury. It does not have much antioxidants to prevent this oxidative injury. So this oxygen free radicals induce DNA damage in the sperms. These are all from study materials, and that is implicated in idiopathic male infertility. Idiopathic means there is semen, everything is normal, but the person is not becoming fertile. So these, since the sperms are surrounded by fatty acids, they are all sites where sperm is a highly metabolically active cell. It has got to move. It has got to, once it starts moving, it's a highly metabolically active cell in the body. So because of that, the reactive oxygen species are more in the sperms, and the sperm is susceptible to injuries by these species. Even in the female also, there is the ovarian follicle is also in a highly metabolically active state. In the follicle, the oxygen species are required for, they are normally needed. Oxygen species illengil ovulation undavilla, follicle rupture undavilla. So the free radicals are needed for breaking the follicle, for releasing the oocyte, for the maturation of the oocyte. Adana free radicals venam. But when they increase in amount and when they cannot be combated by antioxidants, eppozhum body il there is an antioxidant mechanism to combat the free radicals. So when this balance is lost, so when the balance between antioxidants and reactive oxygen species is lost, that is what causes the problems in DNA damage, decreases the sperm motility, decreases the quality of the ovum, and such problems are caused by the reactive oxygen species. So it causes oxidative stress, and even in the oocyte quality, the age-related decline in fertility. Whenever the oxygen species, the free radicals are increased, the oocyte quality is decreased, the number of oocytes are decreased, and as the number of oocytes, only about 400, 500 oocytes are available. If their quality decreases means then we are not able to produce a fertility in the woman. So accumulation can occur due to all these conditions, due to an imbalance, or it can be occurring due to infections, inflammations, chemotherapy, even superovulation. That is, when there is treatment for infertility, they induce ovulation. So that causes superovulation. All that can lead, all these are metabolism eppoka active avunno, appoka free radicals undo, appoka cellular injury undav. So all these can damage the cell. So one important finding here is that sleep is very much concerned with antioxidants. Sleep allows the antioxidant system to recover. All the day we have been working, our metabolism has been active. It is sleep that gives the body's metabolism a rest to recuperate from this metabolic injuries. So sleep deprivation leads to metabolic and immunological problems, and it is needed for whenever there is sleep deprivation, there is antioxidant imbalance in the body. Whenever during darkness, we have got a rhythm called as day-night rhythm or the circadian rhythm. This circadian rhythm is produced by a melatonin that is produced from the pineal gland. And it is actually produced, the rhythm is regulated by the hypothalamus, by the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And in response to this, the pineal gland produces melatonin. And this melatonin is what regulates the various functions during nighttime, daytime, etc. But this melatonin is also identified as an ideal free radical scavenger. And it is not an antioxidant, it just destroys the free radicals. And it has got two properties, it is both lipophilic and hydrophilic. Such substances are very rare in the body, that is, which can enter into cells as well as remain in fluid. So it has got in the ovarian follicular fluid, it can act as an antioxidant. Inside the follicle also, it can act as an antioxidant. So melatonin is a very important part of the antioxidant system in the reproductive tract. So high amounts of melatonin are seen in the follicular fluid before ovulation, and so it acts as a free radical scavenger and ensures the formation of high quality embryos. And so melatonin, in another action, it inhibits the release of estrogens and other hormones from the reproductive tract. So whenever a person is exposed to light, the reduction of melatonin, the secretion of melatonin will reduce. So in night shift workers, there is a hormonal imbalance and there is chance for cancers. So whenever this role of melatonin in the reproductive system is very important. Whenever we talk of nidra, we say the nidrayatam sugam dukham, and finally we say there is also vrishada and klebada. Can't we study the effects of melatonin on the effects of free radical scavenging in the ovarian and follicular fluid? I thought it was a very interesting topic when we thought of fertility. We cannot think of anything in Ayurveda without thinking of food. Ahara sambhavam vastu rogascha ahara sambhavaha. Whenever we think of the definition of Shukra has been given by Ashtanga Sangraha as tatra aharasya samyak parinadasya kramat majjana anupraptasya Shukra satyam vidhiyade. So this is almost a similar definition to what is given for Rasadhadu in Sushruta Samhita. Tatra aharasya samyak parinadasya saraha rasaha ityuchyate. This majjanam anupraptasya shukra satnya labhade. When we think of this shukra formation from majja, it's a controversial topic. We all try to explain how shukra is formed from majja. Majja is, I feel, an adipose tissue pool in the body. Adipose tissue is very much related to the functions of the reproductive system. And because even in the female, most of the hormones, all of them are mainly based on a cholesterol basis. The fat content determines the fertility of the person. And according to when we compare majja and medas, there is a common function of snehana in both of these. Both of these dhadus are indicated for snehana. And the special function of majja is told as purana. Where do you find purana? Purana you find in long bones, because it is the long bones that have the marrow, and in certain flat bones here and there, like the scapula, the ilium, vertebra, and things like that. So when you think of the Majjasara and Medosara, both of them have got the Varna and the Swara, or the Sniktha Varna and Swara are mentioned in both Majjasara and Medosara. This makes me think that the Majja is a total common pool of adipose tissue in the body, and which is related to the formation of the Shukra Dhatu. Whenever we think of bone marrow, we think of the red bone marrow, which is confined to the axial skeleton, and the bone marrow fat is in the appendicular skeleton, that is in the other bones, that is in the limbs, the humerus, femur, and things like that. It is mainly yellow marrow. So again, our acharyas have divided it into Saraktam Meda, and which is found in the Anvasti, and the other Meda, which is found in the Stula Asti. So all this makes me think of a marrow fat, which is a combination of white and brown adipose tissue, and derived from the embryonic cells, which can either differentiate into bone or into fat. So these are embryonic cells. So if it differentiates into bone, it goes into the bone marrow. If it goes to the adipocytes, it forms in the adipose tissue. So it would be better to consider majja as an adipose tissue pool in the body, which is responsible for the formation of Shukra Dhatu. Formation of Shukra from food. Shukram tadasya pravadanti thira yadhyede garbha samudbhavaya, and Vaivagni bhumi ambu guna padavat shatpyo rasepyo prabhavascha sasya. That is, all types of rasas are involved. That is, it is ahara which is responsible for the formation of Shukra. And whatever descriptions are given as Shukra Varthana, that is yat kinjit madhuram sniktham, it is told in Vajigarna. But that is due to a specific use, and it is not specified as an ahara. And when you again think of rasa and shukra, these are the two dhadus which have been clearly defined as saumya, while rekta and artava are clearly defined as agneya. So that is why in the preconceptional measures, all the saumya things like krida, kshira is advised in male, and the agneya varieties like Masha, Taila is advised in the female. We should always look for the saumya. Always, we cannot have, we have all studied in our physics that opposite poles attract and the same poles repel. So that is why one has to be saumya and the other has to be agneya. In Ayurveda, all sorts of actions are based on Shida and Ushna. So we cannot think of any other. If Shukra is saumya, means Artava has to be agneya, and it has to be modified, or it has to be all the processes that work for Artava should be agneya in nature. I think Wahida madam will be delivering a lot of things on the clinical aspects of saumyatva and agneyatva. So yat kinchit maduram sniktham jivanam brahmanam guru harshanam manasascheva sarvam tad vrishyam uchyade. So whatever, this is for the specific use of vrishya. And again there is a, when we say Vajigarna is the last part. If you take Ashtanga Hridaya, Vajigarna is the last part, and before that there is Rasayana. Even in Charaka also the first chapter is Rasayana, second chapter is Vajigarna. So in Rasayana itself, the Balashruti, the beneficial effects is told as Vaksiddhim Vrishadam Kantim Apnodi Rasayana. So why go for a Vajigarna? Why it is better? Labhobayo Shastohi Rasadinam. All the dhadus will be recuperated, or it will be improved using Rasayana. Why has Vajigarna been mentioned as a special chapter? So the answer given in Charaka is that the Rasayana is for a long-term effect. It is you don't have to do Rasayana every day. You do Rasayana once, it will stand you for as long as the dhadus are in a proper state. But Vajikarna is to be done during the time of when the person is trying to conceive, when the person is trying to achieve the reproductive capacity. It is during that time that we have to do Vajikarna. It has got a limited effect. Its effect stays only for a limited time period. And physical activity. We cannot think of today's lifestyle disorders. We cannot go away without talking of such lifestyle disorders. So the effect of Vyayamam, na chainam sahasa akramya jara samadhirohadi, that is to ameliorate the effects of aging. Physical activity is very essential. And removal of excess fat. I told you fat metabolism has to be proper for a proper fertility. So removal of excess fat. Again, whenever we think of Vyayamam in our, what is explained as Vyayamam, there are two types of exercises, aerobic exercises and resistance exercises. Aerobic exercises are those which improve the circulation, and resistance exercises are those which are weight bearing in nature, which increase the muscle mass. So actually our Vyayamam is a combination of aerobic and resistance exercises, because we talk of Lakhavam and Karma Samarthya. Only when there is improved circulation, improved oxygen deliverance to the tissues, there will be Lakhavam and Karma Samarthya. When we talk about Vibhakta Khanagatrattvam and Medasa Kshayam, there comes the role of the weight bearing and the resistance exercises. So whenever there is, and here again we talk of Artha Shakti Vyayama. That is our concept of Artha Shakti is there. Even whenever exercise is not simply blowing your heart out, it should be moderate exercise, because it is just moderate exercise that works on the immune system, that works on the renal system, that works on the liver, that works on the antioxidant mechanism. Only if it is moderate. If you become excessive exercise, means it has got all the opposite effects. In our text it is that Gajam Simhamiva Akarshan Vinashyati. It is the same thing that happens whenever there is. What we can understand is that a sedentary and affluent lifestyle is always pointing towards infertility. I would like to remember the story of Dilipa in Raghuvamsha. He was remaining in the kingdom. He was not able to, his wife, they were not able to get children. So he went to the forest, became a cowherd. He all day by day, day after day, he went looking after Nandini, and at the end of which he became a father. He was able to get children. So the sedentary and affluence, that always is always a block towards the fertility. It is always to be an active. We can think of the motility of the sperms. If you remain in a sedentary state, the sperm will also be sedentary. It will not move. So we have to be, the physical activity has certainly to be increased. So, and remember, there was a study in Kriya Sharira department in Kannur, where it was found that there was a relationship between infertility and pragriti. And it was done by one Dr. Seema there. And it was found that the female infertility is more in Kabha pragriti, and the male infertility is more in Pitta pragriti. And at that time we found a relationship that Shukra is Saumya, the males. In females it has to be a little more Pitta Kabha pragriti should be there in the for the proper fertility. And Shariram Sattva Satnam Cha Vyadhinam Ashrayo Mataha. We cannot think about, as Sir said, in infertility, what has to be done is counseling. That is Sandvaitva. It is a very important factor. Again, I am reminded of a study that was done in the Manasika department in our college. That is infertility-induced stress. So, what is the treatment for that stress? Only to remove that infertility. So, a study was done using Kalyanaka Kridam. So, it is actually, there is a stress that causes infertility and infertility that causes stress. It is actually a vicious cycle. So, chronic or severe stress causes changes in the hormone levels. Now, there is first we thought of neurology, then we thought of endocrinology. Now it has become psycho, neuro, immuno, endocrinology with the hypothalamus as its center. We cannot separate any of these situations. If you're thinking of a hormone, you should think of its psychological effects also. You should think of its immunological effects also. Without thinking of these, you cannot go forward. So even now, the current topic of interest is psycho, neuro, immunoendocrinology. Our acharyas have told about this right from in the beginning. It's a sharirendriya sattvatma samyogo dhari jividam. There is no other way about it. So stress acts on the hypothalamus. It releases corticotrophin releasing factor that inhibits the release of GnRH, and that is called as hypothalamic amenorrhea or hypothalamic anovulation, and it inhibits the release of GnRH. So excessive stress, high fat diets, and lack of exercise, all this puts a big question mark on fertility. When all these are properly managed, we can say there is a when we think of Trayobastamba, we can leave out Abrahmacharya in the context of fertility. So we can look at this, because without Abrahmacharya, there's no scope of fertility at all. So we can create a new set of Trayobastamba in the context of fertility as the excessive, the normal psychological lifestyle of the individual, his diet patterns, and the physical activity. And Saumanasyam Garbhadharananam Daurmanasyam Avrishyanam. It has been told as the Agra Ushada. So there is no question that whatever we need is to increase the manashakti of the person and to increase his thing. And again, it has been told in the Ashtanga Hridaya also, Garbhashe, Marge, Shukle, Anile, Hridi. So whenever, without considering the psychological aspects, it is not relative, it is not proper to approach an infertility case. And even in Charaka also, Garbham Chirat Vindadi Saprajabhi. And these are the causes that are being explained. Here also there is Manasobhitapat. That is one of the causes. And again, when we think of the factors for fertilization, the Garbha Sambhava Samagri, everybody is familiar. Ridu, Kshetra, Ambu, Bija. And in that, the Kshetra is the Yoni Pradosha, the disturbances of the female and the male reproductive tract. I think there's a lot of things going to be discussed about that, so I'm not going to dwell more on that. And in the context of the Yoni Roga also, Yoni Gadas are explained for the cause of Garbha, and the Chigilsa leads to the proper the conception. I think that will be detailed later in the next. Now, when we look at the factors influencing the formation of Garbha as described in Charaka, these are the factors he has described. Shukra, Asrag, Atma, Ashaya, Kala, Sampat, Yasya Upacharascha Hides Tadha Nehi, Garbhasya Kale. That is the healthiness of the Shukram and Asrag, the Atma that comes and joins with the Shukra and Asrag, the Garbhashaya, the Kala, and the Ahara Vihara. This is being told in Sharirasthana. If you turn a few pages back and go to Vimanasthana, you can see the factors influencing Prakriti. These are the same factors. Shukra Shonada Prakriti, Kala Garbhashaya Prakriti, Madhura Ahara Prakriti, and one more, Mahabhuta Vikara Prakriti. That is, more than 2/3 of the factors are the factors that have been responsible for conception. So are these actually the factors for conception, or are these the factors that determine the constitution, the personality, and the character? I think using the modern principles, we are not able to explain how Garbhashaya influences the formation of the character of the individual. So I think there is a little more thought to be done on such subjects. What is the condition of the Garbhashaya? What is the role of the Garbhashaya in determining the Prakriti of the individual? Because it has been told as a factor that influences conception as well as a factor that influences the formation of the Prakriti. The 3 pillars of the body, Dosha, Dhatu, Mala. Whenever we think of the reproductive system, that is Vada is the main person involved here. Nahi Vadadrute Yonir Vanitanam Pradushyadi. Here we have to think of the 2 important types of Vada that have been explained, that is the Vyana Vada and the Apana Vada. Vyana Vada is involved in the Yonaucha Shukla Pratipadanaha, which is involved in the actual process of fertilization, and Apana Vada, that is, which is involved in the expulsion of the Shukra and the Garbha from the body. Whenever we think of the sexual act, it is a combination of sympathetic and parasympathetic reflexes. And there are a lot of hormones that are involved in it. Oxytocins, prostaglandins, which are produced from the female genital tract, are involved in this. All these are pointers to the role of Vata in the fertility function. And so many, there is an important factor here, that is the, I don't know, we all don't give much importance to those chapters now, but I like to read those chapters. That is Loga Purusha Samya. It has been told in Charagam Shariram. There is a chapter that has been devoted to the equality of the environment, equality of the universe, and the equality of the body. I find it a very pertinent subject now, because what we are seeing now is this: barren lands, hills that are being, fields that are being plowed and moved by the JCBs, and all our houses are tiled even without an ounce of mud in them. So we are all moving away from the down to earth. We are not down to earth anymore. We are all staying in high-rise flats. We are somewhere above. We are not on the earth. Earth, or Prithvi, is actually the symbol of fertility. As in which we make the earth barren, and that much there will be the, whatever is seen in the Loga will be seen in the Purusha also. We are making the earth barren. So how can we expect the mothers in us to become flowered and fruited like that? So I would just like to, this is one idea which has been in my mind for a long time. So I just wanted to share some thoughts on, just sprinkle some thoughts for you to ponder upon. And first again, I congratulate all the house surgeons and all the management for having given me an opportunity to speak here. And I hope all of you will be able to succeed in your life, in all your future endeavors. Thank you for patience here.
Now is the time for an open discussion. You may raise your doubts.
The practice of avoiding bath during menstrual period existed. Is there any relevance, like regulating body temperature, etc.? Please share your view. It has been, Snanam is always Deebanam, and it is always causing the Srodoshodhanam, and even Snanam has been contraindicated in conditions like whenever there is a Shodhana process going on. So that must be the thing, but now I don't know if anybody does not take a bath during the menstrual time, because nobody advises that. So I have not thought much about the body temperature part of it, but maybe it is related.
I request Dr. P.M. Dinesh Kumar sir, HOD of Dravya Guna Department, Came City Ayurveda Medical College, to present a memento to Dr. Uma Karthik ma'am as a token of our gratitude.